Aims of the nutrition topic is the definition of nutrition and malnutrition, importance of nutrition in surgical patients, nutrition assessment, and nutrition support, how we can give the nutrition support by enteral and parental routes, and take-home message. So the nutrition is the study of the relationship between food and a healthy body. It is the science of nutrients and how they are digested, absorbed, transported, metabolized, stored, and eliminated by the body. The nutrients are organic and inorganic complexes contained in the food. They are divided into macronutrients and the micronutrients. The macronutrients are proteins, fat, and carbohydrate, and micronutrients are vitamins and minerals. So, aim of nutrition support in surgical patient is to identify the patient at risk for malnutrition and to meet their nutritional requirements. Because in surgery, in surgical ward, more than 30% of the patient present with malnourished conditions, and the other patient which are operated and develop the complications and the long stay in the hospital, they develop the malnutrition. So malnutrition has a high risk of complications and mortality. So if the patient is at risk of malnourished or malnourishment, so if the patient can swallow or he cannot swallow, so if the patient can swallow, so we have to give the nutritional support through oral route. If the patient cannot swallow safely and the GIT is intact, so we have to give the enteral feeding. There are several routes we will discuss later. And if the GIT is non-functional or there is the gut has resected, and so we have to give the parenteral feeding. If the fasting is short, like within 12 hours, so the liver can cope with the fasting state, and in response, the insulin will decrease and glucagon will be higher level, so that there are several organs in the body which use glucose as a nutrient, like the brain, RBCs, WBCs, and the renal medulla. So the glucose is mandatory, and the glucose is essential nutrient to provide energy to these organs. So the liver is the main organ to store and to synthesize the glucose from the substrates like the amino acids and the fat. If the cycle, if the duration is more than 24 hours, so gluconeogenesis starts in the liver, and the main substrate are delivered from the muscle into the to the liver. So if there is a sepsis or trauma, so there is increased energy requirement, which may be 15 to 25%, and increased nitrogen requirement. So there is resistance to the insulin and stress-induced hyperglycemia, and there is preferential oxidation of the lipids, increased gluconeogenesis and protein catabolism, and loss of adaptive ketogenesis, and fluid retention with hypoalbuminemia. So 1 gram of carbohydrate provides about 3.4 or 4 kilocalories, and the fat, 1 gram of the fat provides 9 kilocalories, and protein 1 gram provides 4 kilocalories. And in average, adult needs 30 to 35 kilocalories per kg per day. So there are several causes of malnutrition. One is the reduced food intake. There are several reasons for the reduced food intake that may be anorexic, and if the patient is in fasting, and if the pain on swallowing, dysphagia, and physical or mental impairment. So if the patient is taking less food, so the patient will develop malnourished. And if the patient having malabsorption syndromes like the impaired digestion or absorption, so or excess loss from the gut, these conditions can develop the malnutrition. If there is a trauma, burns, sepsis, surgery, or the patient is having cancer, so these conditions also develop malnourishment. So there are several possible, techniques to assess the nutritional assessment. We have to assess the nutritional assessment by taking the dietary history and history of weight loss. And on the physical examination, the patient general appearance, patient will be emaciated, apathetic look. Assessment of the body fat stores. So we have to see the skin fold examination over the biceps and triceps and subscapular region. And assessment of the protein stores, like we have to see the muscle bellies of the biceps, triceps, and supra and infraspinatus muscles. And assessment of the metabolic stress, like the indirect calorimetry, temperature, WBC count, pulse, positive blood culture, and abscesses. The physiological function with the wound will be poor healing and early fatigability. The grip strength will be less or poor, and the respiratory muscle function test will be. So body weight and anthropometry we have discussed. So the laboratory tests like the serum albumin levels, lymphocyte count, and skin hypersensitivity test, these are some tests which can give clue of the assessment of the malnourishment. So there is a tool which is called the MUST tool, which having components like the BMI, the weight loss in 3 to 6 months time, and if there is acute disease. These having 2 to mass, which comprises of the MUST tool. The BMI, the normal BMI is 18 to 18.5 to 25, this one. And if the patient is underweight, like the 16 and to 18.5, and if it is severely underweight, so if 15 to 16 will be there. So if the patient is obese, so 30 and 35, these are the classes of the obesity. So the nutritional support is given to the patient, which is the having past medical history. If the patient having past medical history of malnourishment, so we have to give support, nutritional support. If there is involuntary loss more than 10%, of the body weight in the last 3 to 6 month time, and there is blood loss, or if the hematocrit is less than 21%, so we have to give the blood to support the nutrition. And if the BMI is less than 18.5, so we have to give the nutritional support. And if the serum albumin level is less than 3 and transferrin is less than 200 milligram per DL, so these are, and if the patient is failure to thrive, and if there is a history of severe burns, trauma, sepsis, pancreatitis, and if the patient is NPO or nil per oral for more than 7 days, so these are the indications for nutritional support. So the nutritional support can be given through enteral and parental route, as we have discussed in the first few slides, that the enteral and parental routes are the main nutritional routes. So the enteral route means the nutrition as we gave through the gut, through oral route, or through the stomach or through the jejunum. And the second one route is the parental route. So we give through the nutrients through the IV line. The enteral nutrition comprises of oral supplements which are given through the oral route. If we give through the NG feeding, tube feeding, or through the gastrostomy tube feeding, the gastrostomy tube that may be percutaneous or open surgical or laparoscopically made gastrostomy tubes, and the other one is a duodenostomy tube feeding that may be made through the laparoscopy or through the open technique. The SIP feeds provide 200 kilocalories and 2 gram protein per 200 carton. So these are the commercially prepared nutritional packages. So if the patient appetite is impaired, so these can be given, and by this route we can give the oral diet starts at regular interval when the patient is shifted from progressively from oral liquid to the soft diet and normal diet within 2 to 3 days. So the tube feeding that may be NG tube, that may be fine tube or tube insertion, and the 20 to 30 ml is administered per hour initially, but gradually we have to increase in 2 to 3 days and discontinued for 4 to 5 hours overnight, so that we can avoid the complication of aspiration. Aspiration is performed on a regular basis. If aspirate is more than 200 ml per hour, so we have to stop the feeding temporarily. So the fine bore tube insertion, so the nasogastric tube is appropriate commonly, but if required for more than a week, then fine bore tube feeding tube is preferred. Fine bore feeding tube is made of soft polyurethane or silicone elastomers. It causes few gastric and esophageal erosions. But if the gastrostomy tube is made, so there are two techniques of the gastrostomy. One is the temporary and one is the permanent. Temporary gastrostomy is made to the stomach, which is passed into the stomach through percutaneous, and that is passed into the stomach, and that is attached and they fixed with the abdominal, posterior abdominal wall. So there's other technique which is called the Janeway gastrostomy, that is the permanent gastrostomy. This this technique involves the in which we make the stomach tube from the interior wall of the stomach, and this is the technique. So we make a tube of the stomach which works as a permanent. So we, after making this tube, yes, this is the interior wall of the stomach. We have made this tube, and after that we will fix this tube with the abdominal wall. So it will works as a permanent gastrostomy tube. So this is the permanent gastrostomy Janeway tube. So this is the other technique of the gastrostomy, which is called the PIG, percutaneous endoscopic gastrostomy, which is made through the help of the endoscope. There is no need of laparotomy, and having less, it is done under local anesthesia. So having less complications. The tube is inserted in the jejunum, so that is called the jejunostomy tube. That can be made through the laparotomy, or we can make it through the help of the laparoscope or the endoscope. So nowadays the jejunostomy is the frequently used and having less complication as compared to the gastrostomy. So the complication of the tube related, like the tube has been mal positioned, and the tube may displaced and leaks into the contents may leaks into the peritoneal cavity and causes peritonitis, and the tube may block or leakage or break that can cause the peritonitis if the contents leak into the peritoneal cavity, and if the contents leak over the skin, that can cause the erosion of the skin and mucosa. There are some complications are gastrointestinal related if the fluid or the nutrients are given hyperosmolar, that can cause the diarrhea, and they can cause the bloating and nausea, vomiting, and abdominal cramps, and aspiration can occur into the lungs, and they can cause the constipation. If we give the nutrition, there is a electrolyte imbalance. So, and we have to give the electrolytes, vitamins, minerals. So if we not give the vitamins, minerals in the proper dosage, so they can develop the deficiencies of the vitamins, electrolyte disorders. So the other one is the tube site infection. So leakage and from that the site, that can cause infection. So there is the other complication is the aspiration. If we give more fluids or more nutrition, so that can cause the overloading. And if we not give in proper supine position, or the patient is unconscious, so that can cause aspiration, pneumonias. If we give more fluids or the more nutrition, So they can cause the diarrhea, or which we can give lower dosage, so they can cause the dehydration, electrolyte imbalances, and rarely they can cause the perforation. Tube may migrate, tube may can perforate the stomach or the jejunum or the esophagus. So these are the complications. The advantages of the enteral feeds, mainly it preserves the gut integrity and decreases likelihood of bacterial translocation and transmigration. So if we don't use the gut, the common cells can be pathogenic, and they migrate and enter into the bloodstream and can cause the bacteremia and septicemia. To prevent this complication, we have to give the nutrition support through the enteral route, and preserve the immunological function of the gut, because there are the Peyer's patches. If we don't give, they ulcerate and they can cause the bleeding, and the immunological function will be disturbed. And it is less cost, because if we give the parental nutrition, it is a highly cost more, and the intake is easily and accurately monitored by the enteral feeds. So there are some contraindications of the enteral feeds. If the patient is vomiting or there is a diarrhea, so if we give through this, the patient will vomit out, and the nutrition will lose, or the wastage. And if there is a paralytic ileus, and if there is a GIT obstruction, and if there is a diffuse peritonitis, and there is a hemorrhage through the esophageal varices, or through the stomach, or rectal bleeding, so, and GI malabsorption. So these are some the contraindications. And there is the short bowel syndrome. If we have resected the gut, in some diseases we can resect the small gut or the colon, so there are chances of this small bowel syndrome. So as we give through the enteral route, it will not absorb, and will disturb. And if the patient is in severe shock and having distal high output fistula, so these are some contraindications for the enteral feeding or enteral nutrition. If we give the enteral nutrition and the parental nutrition, so there are daily requirement of the investigations. So electrolytes are daily basis, monitored on daily basis, and CBC, complete blood count, is daily monitored, and glucose level is 8-hourly monitored, and creatine and urea are daily monitored. Nitrogen intake, output, body weight, and the urine output is monitored every hour, and stool. So we can monitor all these parameters, so that we can manage the electrolyte, glucose, all these, and so that there will be less complications of the enteral and parental nutrition. So the parental nutrition is the second most common route, which is given through the infusion of a nutrient, which is hyperosmolar solution containing the carbohydrates, proteins, fat, and other essential nutrients through an intravenous route. The components of the parenteral nutrition are in elemental or pre-digested form. The protein is is in amino acids, and the carbohydrate is in dextrose, and fat or lipid are in emulsions. And electrolytes, vitamins, and minerals are also added in the parental formulations. The peripheral parental nutrition, there are two methods. One is the total parental nutrition, and one is the through the central line, and one is the peripheral parental nutrition, which is given through the peripheral lines. So the indications of the peripheral parental nutrition or parental line, the calories are provided for less than 2 weeks, and low dextrose concentration 5 to 10% are added or administered through this peripheral line. Amino acids and are concentrated, and the lipids are less than 20% or up to 20%, and osmolarity is 900 milliosmoles per liter, just delivered through the into the peripheral vein. The total parental nutrition, which is given through the central line, is high dextrose concentration 50 to 70%, amino acids are 10%, and the lipids are up to 30%. So there are peripheral lines and the central line. If the short-term central axis is required, so the infraclavicular approach to subclavian vein is best. If the long-term central axis is required, though the tunnel catheter into the subclavian or the internal jugular vein is passed, so to prevent the complication of the infection. And there is a other line which is called the PICC line, which is the percutaneous inserted central catheter, which is inserted into the antecubital fossa and threaded into the subclavian vein and tip placed into in the superior vena cava. But if the complication of the PICC line is that the percutaneous line, if it is more than 1 week, so it can cause the thrombophlebitis. These are the pictorial presentation. So subclavian vein and the line is passed. The tip is into the superior vena cava. Advantages of the parental nutrition are when the small intestine is 2 to 3 feet, and the GIT is intolerant, and oral, we cannot give the oral or enteral support to these patients. So the parental route is the having main advantages. So there is a Harris-Benedict equation for formula which estimates the energy requirements, which is different for the men and women, in which we weight in kilograms, height in centimeters, and age in years. By this formula, we can calculate the energy requirement of the patient. So there are commercially made solutions, commercially prepared solutions, which are 3-in-1, means the glucose, lipids, and the proteins are formulated. So the lipid emulsions are made 10 to 30%, and the 1 gram of the lipid provides 9 kilocalories per gram, as we have already discussed. So we will calculate the Benedict equation. So these are the amino acids are given in 10%. Final volume or the total volume is the amino acid are 10%, dextrose or the glucose is 70%, and the lipids are the 20%. So the complications of the parental nutrition, one is the mechanical. When we place the central line or the peripheral line, that may cause the complications by malposition, hemothorax, pneumothorax, air embolism. If we puncture the vein or the vessel, that can cause the blood loss and puncture of the subclavian artery. And there are some metabolic complications, like we give more fluids, that can cause you fluid overload. If we give more glucose, that can cause the hyperglycemia, hypophosphatemia, hypokalemia, hypomagnesemia, and refeeding syndrome. These are some metabolic complications. So we have to deal according to that. So the refeeding syndrome is that when we, in malnourished, severely malnourished patient, when we start the feeding through the IV line, parental nutrition, or through the enteral route, that can cause the hypophosphatemia, hyperglycemia, and fluid retention, or that can cause the electrolyte imbalance, that can develop the cardiac arrest. So there will be ECG changes and hypotension, arrhythmias, cardiac arrest. And there may be weakness and paralysis of the muscles, respiratory depression, and ketoacidosis and metabolic acidosis. These are the complications of the refeeding syndrome. So before starting the treatment in malnourished patient, we have to correct electrolyte abnormalities before starting nutritional support. We have to continue the monitoring serum electrolyte after nutrition support begins and replete the aggressively. Initiate nutrition support at low rate concentration, 50% of estimated need. If the patient needs 100 grams, so we have to start at the 50 grams of the total, and advantage to go slowly in patients who are at high risk, because the patient will develop complications. So we have to start in lower doses in nutrition. So the overfeeding usually results from overestimation of the caloric needs. Clinically, increased oxygen consumption, increased carbon dioxide production, and suppression of the leukocyte function, and increased infectious risk, hyperglycemia, hepatic dysfunction from the fatty infiltration, and respiratory acidosis from increased carbon dioxide production, and difficulty weaning from the ventilator. So we have to give more focus or more concentration over the overfeeding. So we cannot give the overfeed. So we had to monitor by chest X-ray to check for the placement of the CVP line. We had to monitor the vital signs 4 hourly and weightage of the patient daily basis, and the site of the CVP line, and we had to change the dressing, and we had to monitor the IO charting, intake output charting. Glucose monitoring 3 times a day, daily electrolyte. We have discussed already these. So we have to check the urine by glucose urea, and LFT, serum creatinine, and albumin. So these are done on the weekly or the twice weekly basis. There is a term which is called the short bowel syndrome. Short bowel syndrome is the term when we resect more than 70% of the bowel, and we have removed the 70% of the bowel, and ileocecal junction has been removed, and the remaining bowel is diseased with impaired absorption, that is called the short bowel syndrome. And due to the resections, there is a decreased intestinal surface area, there is a decreased transit time and decreased intestinal absorption. So, and there is, in response to that, there is gastric acid hypersecretion, and that leads to lactic acidosis and nephrolithiasis. These are the complications of the short bowel syndrome. So the treatment of the short bowel syndrome is immediate post-op period, adequate replacement of the IV fluids, electrolytes with zinc and H2 receptor antagonist, and bowel adaptation period is enteral feed starts as soon as possible once stool output is less than 1000 ml per day, and glutamine and medium chain triglyceride to maintain mucosal healing. Long-term treatment, small and frequent oral feeds are started. In intake colon diet, rich in complex carbohydrates are given. If terminal ileum resected, vitamin B12 is given monthly, and in patient with lactic acidosis, carbohydrate diet is reduced. The second term is the gastrointestinal fistula, is diversion of the intestinal contents commonly to the skin. Common causes are the Crohn's disease, bowel injury, and surgery, radiation injuries. And if the output is more than 500 ml, it is called the high output fistulas. If it is less than 500 ml or 300 ml, it is called the low output fistulas. So the take-home message is malnutrition leads to prolonged stay, prolonged recovery period, and increased medical cost. The normal caloric requirement is 30 to 35 kilocalories per kg per day, and metabolic stress is 35 to 40 kilocalories per kg per day. Use enteral feeding unless contraindicated. Low osmolarity peripheral nutrition less than 900 milliosmoles per given via the peripheral line. In high-risk patient to develop refeeding syndrome, we should start with low calories to prevent the complication, refeeding syndrome. The parameters that require daily monitoring are glucose, electrolytes, blood sugar, and IO charting, and temperature monitoring. Thank you so much.